Welcome everyone. This is our weekly webinar for the Escalate Mobile Learning Special Interest Group, also for the Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning Research Cluster here in New Zealand. And it's becoming a bit of an international network. So today is very international, our webinar. We have waking up very early in Japan, Neil Cowie. So welcome, Neil. I think it's just about 5 o'clock in the morning over there or something, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Doesn't everybody get up at that sort of time?
Absolutely.
Yes. And, well, not me, but anyway. And Lisa's just got into work early, especially to join us this morning.
Hi, everyone.
And of course, Charles, our special presenter this morning, all the way from the UK. And probably the main reason why we're doing this slightly different time to what we'd normally do is so it's a better time for Charles and it's not too late for him. So I'm just going to briefly introduce Charles, and then I'll hand it over to him. We've got a little bit of delay in the audio between the UK and New Zealand, but I'll switch my camera off, and Charles might do that as well once we hand it over to him. So Charles has been doing some research on iBeacons, and if you're not familiar with iBeacons, they've been around for a while, but they're basically Bluetooth low energy devices that transmit a code, and basically any Bluetooth device can be an iBeacon, because it's any Bluetooth device is sending out a signal. So things like an Apple TV can be an iBeacon, your phone can be an iBeacon, and the way they tend to work is via apps on your phone, which check the signal that's coming from a Bluetooth beacon and then interpret it and do an action. So the idea really is to have this interaction with the physical world using proximity. So Bluetooth is low power, it's short range, and so it's leveraging that technology that when you get close to an object, an interaction happens. And of course, in mobile learning, that's a really interesting technology, because it enables us to interact with our phones with the real world in a unique way. So I was just really interested to see Charles had published a paper on this in Research and Learning Technology Journal, and I've had a quick read through the paper, and as Charles says, there's very little actually published on this topic so far, apart from the marketing sort of splurge and the fact that Apple really developed this technology as a marketing tool for supermarkets and things like that, and now we're starting to use it in education. So really interested to find out what Charles has been doing in this space, find out what he's learned about how the people are using it and the potential. So I'm going to hand over to Charles. Charles, just tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then I'll let you talk about your research, and if Lisa and Neil want to ask questions, then go ahead, or at the end. And I'm just going to turn my camera off now. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Tom. Well, likewise, my face off, then do let me know. Much firstly for having me. On a personal level, I've been to the education system here in the UK, and I was introduced to Beacons when I went to a conference about how some of the more progressive senior schools, the public schools as we call them here, are using beacon technology, and probably right at the front of that of those schools is a senior school in this country called Bryanston, and they were really pioneering from the very earliest days this the transfer of iBeacon technology into education, with partnering a school in Australia way back in about 2008, and they're quite close to me here physically, and so when I then took time out from my teaching, I'm a sort of I teach at middle level. I teach history to sort of up to 13-year-olds, and I took a year out to do masters, and I was very interested in being a teacher, in how I could maximize the learning experience for the children that I teach, say within a half an hour or an hour time that you have them. How could I ensure that I am maximizing the learning experience for every single child in that hour and that half hour, which is almost, if you like, the holy grail for teaching. Introduced to this idea of these iBeacons in this conference when I came to the chance to do a dissertation in my master's. I felt this was a fabulous opportunity to explore this new technology and see really whether it was this would be something that I could really expand my teaching, or really, as was possible with my I'm sort of quite not, I'm not a technophobe, but I'm sort of quite critical of technology. So I wanted to see whether it really would benefit teachers and the learning. It seems to have gone off. Is everybody still there?
No, we're still here. We just turned our cameras off.
Yeah, I'm here.
You're still there.
I'm
Oh,
still here.
right, cool. Would you like me to turn my camera off as well?
Up to you, Neil.
Okay,
it seems okay.
I'll turn my camera. Cool.
Yeah, I think it's actually better connection with the camera off. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll turn it off now. You all see my ugly mug. Now, so I then did this, and I worked with this school, Bryanston in Somerset. And what was really interesting was that this was the first time Bryanston had certainly been using iBeacons in a classroom. Up to this point, they'd really only been using them for communication purposes, which is another whole strand that you can use beacon technology for. Review and everything about all this, realized that actually virtually nobody has been doing beacon technology in the classroom. And I found it absolutely fascinating. We learned a huge amount, both positive, but also with I wouldn't say health warnings, but certainly with usings. It is certainly not a panacea. It certainly doesn't suit every child all the time, let alone every teacher every time. But for those who really do get to grips with it and really enjoy it, it really does make a difference. But the big catch-all is that teachers have to want to use it, and the children who you are teaching with this technology have to want to use it as well. And if both of those two things come together, then it does have a lot of potential. But again, coming from the critical point of view, as with all technology, it has its limitations, and it cannot be used all the time by everybody for everything. Is limited in its servedness.
I was really interested, Charlie, in your argument that iBeacons were particularly useful for supporting constructivist learning environments.
Yeah. This really came, I think that there were three major ways that we were using it with the children. It was a very, very small sample of children. I think it was only 12 children, boys and girls. They were age 14. But we were using it in a, we're experimenting on how teachers could be using it. And I think we found out that certainly for independent learning, it was excellent. All of this is massively predisposed to the teacher having put the right sort of resources on the beacons themselves, and use them in the right sort of way. As with all resources, as with all technologies, it's only as good as the users. And in this case, one of the massive most technologies got the teacher and the students themselves. And as with all technology, they're only as powerful, as efficient and as useful as the users themselves. And this was again another massive learning was that it was very stop-start, ineffectual to start with. But the more that we persevered with it, the more we, the teachers, because I was collaborating with their regular teacher. I came into the school to work with this teacher. The more she and I got used to it, the better we got. Equally, the learners, the kids as well, got better and better the more they learn about it. So, but once it was all up and running, we found independent learning. It was absolutely fantastic. This is probably the biggest benefit for using Beacons, was that you could put as many resources as you liked on a particular topic, and the high ability children in this mixed ability class could absolutely fly, and could go at their own pace without being held back by the lower able, who would perhaps always be asking, can you say that again, or I didn't understand that, or whatever, and hold the others back. And the flip side of that coin is that the lower ability were able to get as much out of it as the higher ability, because all the resources so again, it comes expertise of the team to what the resources will be needed to make the lesson run smoothly, and the learning be the kids to be fluent in their learning. So independent learning was absolutely fantastic. We then started getting more confident, and rather than just learning about one particular topic, we started putting 2 topics on there. So when it came to revision, and the children could pick and choose which topics they wanted to learn about, and all the benefits of the iBeacon to you during the learning, to able, or indeed to scaffold or support the lesser able, and she found that terrifically useful. So independent learning was a real winner there. There were other ones, such as see if I can remember. I've got my dissertation here.
Neil's asked a question in the chat, Charles, wanting to know if you could actually give us an example of what you know, one activity you actually used the iBeacons for.
Yeah, I think we did 3 action research cycles. This was an action research methodology, which was conducted over 9 lessons, and there were 3 lessons given over to one particular topic or type of learning, and we did, for example, the teacher was giving them a chance to revise. For instance, this is where it was very effective, was in the revision of 2 topics. They were coming up to the end of your exam. You got 10 topics that they have to know for the exam from previous learning. There were 2 that were identified that were particularly weak at. So she put on resources for, I think this was in chemistry, and I'm not a chemist, but I think there was reactivity series, and there was metals or something like that. And so she would put on all sorts of resources. And one of the best things that worked with this was something called using the app Explain Everything, and she was able to do all her teaching using Explain Everything as though it was a whiteboard, and these kids were able to go back in and have a look at that, and then reinforce their understanding or correct their learning, and they really felt that, as with Khan Academy and things, they were able to go over it time and time again, or rewind and go back forward. One of the massive benefits of this was that whilst they were doing the learning through the iBeacons she put on the beacons, she was able then to go around each and every single one of them and help them with any further questions and things. So almost there was the superficial teaching was going on digitally while she was personally going around and dealing with individual problems and things, and that really helped the lower ability who take up most of the time, most of the teachers' times, whereas the higher ability were able just to sort of get on and do all their learning.
So with the iBeacons
use of these beacons.
just to point to technology resources. I mean, were the resources actually online, and the iBeacons were pushing out a link, a URL to that, or did the iBeacons actually have their own independent memory that the content lived on?
That through our ignorance, and that's one of the things I say, is that one of the biggest hindrances is users' procedural knowledge, and we didn't really know how to connect the students to URLs and things. And actually we just thought you could put the URL on and then the children would be able to click on it and go. Well, you can't, because I mean, this is an iBeacon. I've got here a couple all different manufacturers, like, so this is BMW and this is Ford or whatever, you know, they all do the same sort of thing, but they all have sort of different ones, but they all do the sort of thing, different designs. Sorry, what was your question?
Oh, just wondering where the content lived, or were the videos, the instructional videos, actually loaded onto the iBeacons, or did the iBeacons just point a URL to the video online?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, no, I found that's not quite as simple, because they have to then copy the URL, then put it in Google or whatever themselves. They actually have to actively go out of the iBeacon and then onto the internet and look for it themselves. So you can still point them to internet sites and things. Where these were particularly useful is that but it's time consuming, is that the teacher would produce her own resources digitally. I mean, at its simplest, you can scan in a worksheet or something, so it's digitally there. But she found most useful was producing bespoke resources herself. So things like Explain Everything was a fantastic app that she used as a sort of like an interactive whiteboard, and she would write thing down and go through all the steps, and they could hear her talking all of this while she was doing that. Other things would have been yeah, I suppose there would have been recordings of her doing things, and you can put your own links on there and things like that. Another really good way that we use this was in what I would call, as teachers, we would call the learning journey. So she would, for instance, talk about metallurgy or something like that. Actually, if I'm going to talk about things as I would do it, is I'm more confident of talking about history. For example, let's say I'm teaching my children about the Black Death, and you could use these in a number of different ways. Let's say I want them to know about 4 different aspects of the Black Death: the spread, the cause, the consequences, and the symptoms, or something like that. On one beacon about the spread, on another beacon, put all the resources I know, and these can be multiple types of resources. You could have videos, you could have book extracts, you could have documents, you could have documentaries, whatever. So I would then put on what we then call stations, and I would create 4 stations around the classroom, and each one of these would be on a single station. And these are broadcastable, limit or expand how far away they broadcast. And so all children would, for instance, go around one set. That's what we did in research in chemistry. The children would sit on the table, and this one iBeacon would be in the middle, and it would broadcast only so far, you know, half a meter or something like that. And then iPads, which are receptive to receiving the signals from these, would say you're in proximity to a beacon. They press go or push or something like that, and then you can access all the resources on here. These push pieces of tech, they're very, very simple in that it says I'm here, but you then have to pull out whatever it's got on there. It won't give you anything. You have to go in and get it out. But then, so for instance, if I'm teaching the Black Death, there would be all sorts of different types of resources on here on the spread, and the children could learn about the spread of the Black Death through video, or me teaching through an Explain Everything app, or whatever it might be. Once they've done that and got all their information on, they go on to number 2, where this iBeacon has everything on it about the consequences, and they can learn all about that. So there are 4 stations, and children are concurrently learning all about different things, and I can then sort of go around and just check that they are actually genuinely what they should be learning. That's one way of doing it. Another one I was very effective that she did with what I called this learning journey, whereby station number 1 was the most basic information about a topic. In her case, I think it was metallurgy or something like that I didn't understand, but it was the most basic level. And once the children have got that, they then move on to the next station, which is station number 2, and that what they learned at station 1, but developed it further. And then once they got that, they go on to the next station, and it just takes it further, deeper and deeper, and higher thinking. And what we're there is we see the children are more being followed by there is definite physical picture of how far the learning has got, and we found that very, very, very interesting, useful.
Hey, well, it's awesome, Charles. I think what I'll do is I might just take over the camera and do some screen sharing and show people your research article, and perhaps a couple of links on iBeacons just as examples for them. So we'll get Lisa and Neil to ask a couple of questions as well. So I'm just going to move into screen sharing and pull up your article so people can see. There we go, present to everyone. So this is the ALT journal, Association for Learning Technology in the UK, and the journal is Research in Learning Technology. So it's been around for quite a while now, but has been through a number of different publishers recently. So this is Charles's article. So I do a lot of reviewing for RLT and a little bit of guest editing, and so I came across this article and thought that's really interesting. So this is Charles's article. If you want to download it, have a look at it, just go to the journal.alt.ac.uk site, and it's one of the more recent papers there. You can see he's got some images of iBeacons, a lot of discussion about them, some of the activities that they did there in a nice tables describing them. And then he talks about, there's the 4 stages idea that Charles was just talking to us about. And so students going around the various tables, and each table having an iBeacon with various content. And because these are proximity based, they can only access the content when they're sitting at that table. So it has that element of that physical and time constraint to that learning activity. You know, why would I be in class? Well, you have to access this type of learning. So some of the results and outcomes. So it's a really interesting research, very practical, but also very much based in the literature, and it's got a great methodology of action research. So I'd definitely recommend you have a read of that. That might bring up some of your possibly in downloads and citations there, Charles. But yeah, that's the article that Charles has written on the beacons. So
I think
an
what was
example of a beacons manufacturer estimate. Yeah, sorry, Charles, go ahead.
No, sorry. All I was going to say was that I think one of the unique things about that paper was that, as I mentioned, that I actually combine how to use the technology with pedagogical theory, and that hasn't been done before. And yet, all the research says that teachers ought to and need to be able to know how to use it professionally, not just how to use it. And so there's a great, I hope, comes across quite a synthesis of pedagogical theory with that technology as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good paper. So just for people who are not quite sure how the technology works, I mean, there's a nice little diagram there on the Estimate site, basically using your smartphone as the interface and Bluetooth being the main technology, and the sorts of things that you can activate via the beacon technology. They have a nice little animation at the start of their site giving you how this technology could be used, particularly in a marketing situation, which is really the main market these have been developed for. So it's interesting to see how they can potentially be used in education as well. And of course, it was originally developed by Apple, but it is cross-platform because it works on Bluetooth, so it works on Android devices as well. And Apple have quite a bit of developer information available if people are interested. So there we go. Very, very brief.
As in the BBC, as BBC would say, as the other alternatives, being there are, although Apple was the first to develop these, Google have jumped in on the technology, and they've produced their own. Their technology is called Eddystone, England, because that is literally what they say it does, and in that it is a beacon and it broadcasts a signal. And then you have to be within that area of signal, and it'll pick it up. And there are a lot of papers out there that are now comparing Google to Apple's iBeacon technology. They say that be more useful and further. I mean, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Certainly in the education world, the school I working in is a Google school. So there are other manufacturers other than Apple.
And Neil just asked a question
to answer your question about how much they are. These are staggeringly cheap, actually. As with cars and things, you get what you pay for, and the cheaper ones do. They're all fairly basic, but some are cleverer than others. I think this is a cat one, which is a manufacturer, and I think they're about 20p, 30p, 40p. I mean, not much, and going up to, I mean, £2-3, that sort of thing. I mean, they're really not very much at all. And so they're more. This is Aruba, Blue Cat, but there are at least a half a dozen that I've come across, but probably half a dozen more than that.
Yeah, we've used some very, I mean, it's actually about 3 or 4 years ago now, but some very basic USB beacon dongles that basically, they're powered by USB, any USB slot, so you can plug them into a computer, into any device that has a USB port, and that powers the beacon, and then the beacon just starts broadcasting, and you use some software to code what that broadcast does. So yeah, they come in a whole range of self-powered or externally powered.
I think one of the other really exciting potentials for these, I mean, there are so many different avenues yet to be explored, but one that I've discussed with others is that, particularly for the those requiring learning support, who don't like others to know that they're on learning support, particularly in the teenage years, what's really clever, and you can use your phone to do, and have to have these as well, but if you load up one of these with learning support, put it in your pocket, and you put it on the lowest as you're going around and everyone else is beavering away and doing doing lots of learning, you can pop it as a teacher, and you can sidle up next to on that table, and the learning support pupil is struggling, and you say, so how are you getting on? Well, or I said, well, and then actually you're chatting to them, and because they are, you can simply say, oh, well, have you looked at this one? And no one else knows that they've only got that one particular piece on. They go, oh no, I haven't. Oh, thank you. They then sort of save that on theirs, and then so you can very surreptitiously support the less able without broadcasting that they are being given more help than others. And I think that's really quite exciting for those who are fairly stigmatized in the classroom, whether they feel they are or not. They feel that they are. So that's quite. I think that's how we as teachers can be quite supportive in a very clandestine way.
So Lisa has a question. Lisa.
Thanks very much, Charles. It's really actually really interesting. I'm going to have a look offline when we finish this to see how exactly they work. I was wondering, the initial project that you did for the 14-year-olds, how long did that project take to set up? Maybe I might have missed that in the conversation. And what support did the teachers need? Did they need extra support? What support did the teachers need, or did they find it easy?
As two. Yeah, I think I got that. Let me take that in two separate stages, and then please come back to me if I haven't answered a question. How long did it take to set up, and then how much support was needed? Actually, all told, I mean, I did it at this, and I think I probably took in the end. I already had an inroad into the school and into the head of technology, because he'd already done the talk a couple of years before. So actually, once I got onto him and I knew what I wanted to do, it was actually very, very quick. Because I happened to sort of say, look, I want to do this. Can I do this at your school? And he happened to say, well, actually, there's a chemistry teacher who is also really interested in this, and she's a list too. She knows nothing about it. I'll put the two of you together. And then she did the bulk of the work in preparing all the resources and everything. We met up for a meeting or two, and then we sort of got on with it. But actually, to get to that stage, it had taken me a good 3 weeks or so to find out what on earth it was that I wanted to find out about these sort of things. And I wrote to various different schools, and cut a long story short, a lot of things fell through, and I ended up having to do a lot of my things at the 11th hour. Fortunately, it all came to fruition. So it was just a meeting of minds, really, and when minds meet, they make things happen, and it happened really quite quickly. I already had inroads into the school, so that really helped. I think more interesting is your question about how much support was needed, because that was one of the massive findings of our research, was that this cannot be done without support for the teachers, both technologically, mainly technologically, and we were helped enormously by the head of ICT, who came in, and both non-techie teachers, a huge amount of help from him setting up the iPads. And I talk about in the article the use of something called the class map, which not revolutionized, but it certainly enormously, almost overnight, from the first research cycle to the second research cycle, was totally different, because we had this ability to be able to manage the iPads that the children had, and we could view what they're doing. We could set it, iron out all the technological problems which we were absolutely almost derailed by in the first action research cycle. But also, I think so definitely there has to be some support from the technology department. For instance, I mean, some of they're not the most reliable pieces of kit, and we were getting there, and the kids wouldn't be able to access them or whatever, and so we found out why that was, and one of the reasons was because they were too close together. So the children sitting in the middle would pick one up from the left and from the right, and we couldn't tell which one. It was all disastrous. But we learned to actually separate them further out, and reduce also the iPad's receptiveness. So they picked up signals from a much smaller area. So that helped. But again, it was all the ICT department telling us, try this, try that, try the other. One of the other things as well, that you try loading these onto the resources, load resources onto these. And then when you look on your master computer, they're not there. Well, because they're dud or whatever that. So actually, we then learned, as all teachers get to know, do it all in advance, make sure it's all working before you actually have to go into battle. And the ICT department then would sort of swap them straight away and sort it all out. So it could not have been done without support from the ICT department. Again, that's all massively supported by the literature into the use of using technology. Teachers are not the most techy of people. They're actually pretty bloody stubborn when it comes to it, and so we depended hugely on the very kind ICT support. Was actually, we found we got better and better at it the longer we did it, and so actually it's about that perseverance. And in the article, I talk about the teacher actually saying, well, I would have given up, you know, at the first go, because as teachers we sort of go, oh, it doesn't work, like that's it, I'm going to bin it. But actually, because we were doing this, and actually she persevered and we persevered, we were finding out as we went along, we did actually end up ironing it all out. And within not very long, had we given up then, we wouldn't have realized that actually we persevered just one cycle more. So what was that, a week or two more, we would have got through all the hurdles that we thought were Everest. Well, actually they were not. It was absolutely fine. So I think in the art, there's huge lessons supported by the research, by the theorists, that you know, teachers using technology need to be supported. Absolutely. Does that help, Lisa?
Immensely, thank you so much. I was just wondering how that was. I do have a couple of teenage children, so wondering, you know, how they would have handled it in the classroom. But you've also answered the question about what support they need. And yes, I'm in a support role myself, so teaching university lecturers is also a bit like teachers in the classroom. They need hand-holding.
Yeah.
Hey, well, that's pretty much our time is up. So we're probably going to have to sign off now, Charles. I mean, it's really, really interesting topic, and I think you've done a fantastic job of approaching it in a really rigorous way, you know, marrying pedagogy and technology together, and using action research as methodology. It's fantastic, and look forward to seeing some more research from you, and perhaps getting you back again to report on what are you doing next. And hopefully we can maybe one day catch up, perhaps at the old conference or something in the UK, or you might make it over to New Zealand, or even to Japan and meet Neil. So thank you once again, Charles. And thanks to Lisa and thanks to Neil for joining us and discussing us. I'm going to click the stop button now, and that'll be the end of our broadcast, and it'll be available online. I'll send you the link later, Charles, and we'll also tweet it. So no, Charles is not on Twitter, so we won't see that, but I will email the link to you, Charles. Thank you.
And also,